The discovery. The early morning light painted the city of Detroit in shades of gold, casting long, stretching shadows across the industrial district. Detective Mike Carter was no stranger to the city's more desolate corners, but even after 20 years of service, there were still moments that made his gut churn with uncertainty. As he pulled up to the city's sprawling dump, the familiar, acrid smell of waste and chemicals hit him like a punch to the chest. It was an area few people ever visited unless they had to, a place that whispered secrets no one wanted to hear. His rookie partner, Detective Ethan Reynolds, sat beside him, his youthful face scrunched in distaste. Ethan, still wide-eyed with the idealism of someone fresh out of the academy, was still getting used to the rough edges of the job. "This place smells like a chemical plant exploded," he muttered, wrinkling his nose. "Why would they send us out here for a check on suspicious activity?" Mike turned to face him, his eyes steady and calm despite the situation. "Sometimes, kid, it's the calls that make the least sense that turn out to be the most important. Something doesn't sit right with me about this one." He didn't need to explain the gut feeling that had been gnawing at him ever since they got the dispatch call. 2 decades of experience had taught him to trust his instincts. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he knew this wasn't going to be a simple, routine stop. He could feel it in his bones. The patrol car's tires crunched over gravel as they began their walk through the maze of old machinery and rusted scrap metal. It was quiet, almost unnervingly so, save for the faint sound of traffic from the distance. The place felt abandoned, desolate, like a forgotten chapter in the city's history. They moved through the debris, the soft thud of their boots the only sound in the stagnant air. Then, a faint sound stopped them in their tracks. A low, weak whimper. Mike's hand shot up instinctively, signaling Ethan to stop. He strained his ears, listening again. There it was, almost imperceptible above the ambient noise of the city. A sound of suffering, a cry for help, so faint it was easy to miss. But Mike had heard it clearly. "Stay alert," Mike whispered, his voice tense. They followed the sound, weaving between piles of discarded machinery and forgotten parts of the city's industrial past. Every step felt heavier, as if the air itself was thick with the weight of something hidden. Then they rounded a corner and froze. Among the scattered refuse, lying motionless, was a German shepherd. At first glance, it looked like any stray dog, dirty and battered, but Mike's eyes narrowed as recognition hit him like a wave. He could see the familiar markings, the worn but unmistakable training collar still clasped around its neck. His heart sank. "That's Riley," Mike breathed, the words coming out in a whisper of disbelief. The dog wasn't just any stray. This was Riley, the most decorated K-9 officer in the Detroit Police Department, the one who had cracked the notorious Thompson case the previous year. He was a legend among the department, known for his intelligence, loyalty, and unparalleled skill. To see him here, discarded like trash, was incomprehensible. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the revelation settling in. "Wait, Riley." The Riley. He was clearly stunned. The one from the Thompson case. But why? What happened to him? Mike didn't have the answers. His chest tightened as he crouched down slowly, approaching the dog. Riley's fur was matted with oil and grime, his once proud form barely recognizable. His body was covered in scars, surgical marks that were far too precise to be accidental. Mike's heart dropped as he gently examined the dog. It was obvious that this wasn't just neglect. Something much darker had happened here. "Easy, boy," Mike murmured, his voice soothing as he carefully examined Riley. The dog's once bright eyes were dull, and his proud tail, which had once wagged with excitement at the sight of Mike, gave a weak thump. It was the only sign of life left in him. Mike's hand brushed over Riley's head, and the dog seemed to recognize him, though the signs of trauma were all too clear. "Someone did this to him," Mike muttered under his breath. His mind raced. Why was Riley, a dog who had been forced into retirement only 6 months ago, abandoned here in this trash-filled wasteland? He had been living out his golden years with a family, or so they had thought. But here he was, discarded like an old piece of equipment, a prized partner in the department, thrown away as if he were nothing more than a broken tool. Riley's injuries weren't just from neglect. As Mike's fingers carefully ran over the dog's scars, he recognized the deliberate precision of the wounds. They weren't from an accident or abuse. These were surgical scars, intentionally inflicted. It was a chilling realization. "Mike, what's going on?" Ethan asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and concern. The young detective had never seen anything like this before, and Mike could see the shock in his eyes. "We need to get him to a vet," Mike said, standing up quickly, his tone sharp. "Now, this isn't just a case of abandonment. Someone's been using him. And whatever's going on here, it's bigger than us." As they rushed Riley to the nearest veterinary clinic, Mike's mind kept racing. Who would do this to a hero like Riley? What had they turned him into? And more importantly, why was he here, discarded and alone? As the clinic's door swung open, Mike could already feel the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. This wasn't just an abandoned police dog. Riley was a symbol of something much darker, something that had been hidden beneath the surface for far too long. The real questions were only just beginning, and Mike had a feeling that what they were about to uncover would shake the foundation of everything they thought they knew about the people they served and protected. The unraveling. The morning air was heavy with anticipation as Mike and Ethan arrived at the veterinary clinic, Riley's limp form lying in the backseat of their unmarked car. The usually calm and orderly place was now tinged with urgency, a sharp contrast to its usual role as a sanctuary for animals. Mike could feel the weight of the case pressing on him even more now, as if each passing minute was unraveling something much bigger than just a dog in distress. Dr. Sarah Jenkins, known for her relentless dedication to animals, was waiting for them at the door. She immediately took charge, her professional demeanor sharp as she guided them into the clinic's back rooms. Mike's heart tightened as he watched Riley being wheeled into an examination room. The dog's once proud and alert posture had been reduced to a slumped, exhausted shell of what he had once been. His eyes, though dull and tired, still held a glimmer of recognition as they met Mike's gaze. "I've seen my fair share of abuse, but this is something else," Dr. Jenkins muttered as she gently ran her hands over Riley's battered body. She seemed perplexed, even a little horrified. Her fingers paused over a series of small but deliberate scars, surgical marks, just like Mike had seen earlier. "This wasn't just neglect," she continued. "These injuries are too precise, too intentional." Mike nodded, his stomach twisting. The surgical scars weren't the only thing that bothered him. There was something else in the dog's demeanor, something almost instinctive. Riley was reacting to sounds that Mike couldn't hear, his ears twitching slightly, his head tilting toward distant noises, as if he was responding to frequencies only he could perceive. The dog had been trained for much more than typical police duties, but Mike had no idea how deep that training went. Whatever had been done to him, it wasn't just the usual work of the Detroit Police K-9 unit. Dr. Jenkins glanced up at them. Concern etched into her features. "I've cleaned him up, stabilized him for now. But something's not adding up here. These surgeries, they're not from a standard vet procedure. Whoever did this had medical training, and this kind of work isn't something you'd expect to see on a retired K-9. It's like he's been reconditioned, repurposed. Whatever this is, Mike, I need you to take a closer look at something." Sarah led them to the back of the clinic, where she had already prepared Riley for further examination. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights above felt oddly quiet as they entered the sterile room. Riley's medical history, once a straightforward record of a police dog's routine checkups, had taken on a new layer of complexity. Sarah pulled up the dog's x-rays on a monitor, and the detectives leaned in. "You see here," she asked, pointing to several spots on the screen where Riley's bones showed signs of being restructured, altered in ways that shouldn't have been necessary for a police dog nearing retirement. This isn't the work of a veterinarian. This is a more specialized procedure, surgical enhancement, if you will. Mike's mind raced. Riley, a hero who had served the department with distinction, had been altered in ways that didn't seem legal, ethical, or even humane. His body had been modified. But to what end? "Look at this," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper as she zoomed in on an area of Riley's shoulder. The incision wasn't just a scar from an old injury. It was a calculated cut, made with precision. Whoever did this, Mike, they knew exactly what they were doing. This isn't something we're used to seeing. The detective's heart sank. There was something more to this dog's story, something that went beyond any ordinary police operation. Riley wasn't just a dog. He had been a part of something much larger, something hidden from the public eye. And Mike was beginning to realize that they had only scratched the surface. Just then, Riley's behavior shifted. His ears perked up again, his body tensing as he responded to something none of them could hear. Mike's instincts kicked in. He recognized the signs. Riley was reacting to something external, something he had been trained to respond to. "What's happening to him?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with both awe and confusion. "He's like, not just a dog anymore." Sarah nodded solemnly, her green eyes meeting Mike's. "He's more than just a dog. I've seen police dogs before, but this is different. I'm not just talking about his injuries, Mike. I'm talking about his instincts. They've been honed, altered. Whatever happened to Riley, it's part of something much bigger than we realize." Mike's thoughts began to line up. His gut had told him from the beginning that this wasn't just a stray case. Riley's advanced training and the mysterious circumstances surrounding his injuries weren't coincidences. He had been part of something that had been hidden from the public for years. And now, with Riley at the center of it all, Mike had the sinking feeling that they were about to uncover a secret the police department had tried to bury. "Riley's behavior isn't just a random response," Mike said, his voice steady, though his thoughts were spinning. "He's reacting to something specific. And if we don't figure out what that is, we might be in over our heads." Sarah walked over to her desk, pulling out a small vial containing a microchip. She handed it to Mike, her expression tight with concern. "This is not a standard police chip. I found this under his skin when we were cleaning him. It's encrypted, and I've got a feeling it's connected to whatever operation he was part of." Mike held the chip in his hand, his mind working overtime. If this was the key to unlocking the mystery, he needed to act quickly. "We're not just dealing with a retired K-9 here," Mike muttered under his breath. "We're dealing with something much darker." As he looked at the chip, Riley's eyes met his once more, still intelligent, still aware, but filled with a silent plea. The dog had been through so much, and Mike could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The truth was out there, but would they be able to find it before it was too late? "We need to figure out where this chip leads," Mike said, standing up. "It's time to find out what's really been going on and why Riley's at the center of it." Sarah, with an expression that matched Mike's grim determination, nodded. "I'll keep Riley here. You two go, but be careful. Whoever's behind this, they'll stop at nothing to protect their secrets." As Mike and Ethan left the clinic, the sun had already started to dip below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the city. They didn't know it yet, but the trail was about to take them far deeper into the shadows than they could ever have imagined. The final revelation. The city of Detroit had a way of holding secrets, secrets buried deep within its forgotten corners and its crumbling buildings. As Mike and Ethan made their way through the now darkened streets, they felt the weight of Riley's story pressing on them. The sun had set, leaving the city with a blanket of inky darkness, but it was the shadows within that seemed to matter now. Their destination was a dilapidated industrial complex on the outskirts of the city, one that had been vacant for years. The coordinates from Riley's implant led them straight here. The feeling in Mike's gut had only grown stronger. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as he pulled into the shadowed parking lot of the facility. This place was more than just a storage unit. It was where the final pieces of the puzzle would fall into place. "Stay sharp, Ethan," Mike said, his voice low but firm. He didn't need to tell the rookie twice. Ethan's youthful enthusiasm had been replaced by the gravitas of the moment. This wasn't the kind of case that got wrapped up in a few hours. This was something bigger, something that had been lurking beneath the surface for years. The air in the industrial area felt thick with history. The remnants of a city once full of life, now left to decay in silence. As they moved through the building's abandoned halls, they noticed the faint hum of activity. The place seemed oddly well kept for being on the verge of collapse. Something wasn't right. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the concrete halls. As they passed old equipment and broken-down machinery, a chill ran down Mike's spine. He knew they were close. His eyes scanned the rooms, searching for anything out of place. At the far end of the building, a door stood slightly ajar, the faint light of a flashlight flickering from within. "Do you hear that?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. Mike nodded, his instincts already on high alert. He could hear the unmistakable sound of voices, low murmurs, as though the people inside knew exactly what they were looking for. The detectives pressed their backs against the cold wall, trying to make out the conversation. "I told you we couldn't leave a trace of Operation Shadow Guard," one voice muttered. "That dog, the K9. He was the last one. We can't afford any mistakes." Mike's blood ran cold. The mention of Operation Shadow Guard was like a lightning bolt of realization. This wasn't just a rogue operation. It was something systematic, something sanctioned at the highest levels. They had stumbled upon the remains of a covert project that had, for years, operated in the shadows of the department. And now it was all coming to light. Riley was the final piece. The detectives exchanged glances. Without a word, they drew their guns and crept forward, their footsteps nearly soundless on the cold concrete floor. As they approached the door, they saw three figures huddled around a table, their faces obscured by the dim light. They were looking at something: papers, files, maybe even the records of the very operation they had uncovered. "Let's move," Mike muttered, his voice steady. "On three." They burst into the room, guns raised, catching the figures completely off guard. The room was filled with the faint glow of old computer screens, and stacks of documents covered the table. The three figures froze, their eyes wide with shock. "Don't move," Mike shouted, his voice commanding. The figures quickly raised their hands in surrender, clearly not expecting the detectives to find them here. As they complied, Mike's eyes flicked to the documents spread across the table. What he saw made his stomach twist. The papers contained detailed records of Operation Shadow Guard. Riley had been part of a secretive program designed to enhance the abilities of police dogs beyond their natural instincts. The program had involved cutting-edge medical procedures, advanced training, and even experimental surgeries, all in the name of creating the perfect K9 unit. Riley, with his advanced training and modifications, had been one of the most successful subjects of the operation. But it wasn't just about training police dogs. The files revealed something far darker: hidden agendas, a network of powerful figures who had used the program for their own purposes, manipulating not just dogs, but also the people around them. They had seen the dogs as tools, not partners, and when the program was shut down, the remaining subjects had been discarded like broken machinery. Mike's heart pounded in his chest. This was bigger than he could have imagined. One of the figures, a man in his mid-40s, spoke up, his voice shaky. "You don't understand. You think this is about a few dogs. No, detective. It's about what they were trained to do. It's about control." Mike's expression hardened. He had no patience for excuses. Who gave the orders? Who authorized this? The man hesitated before his eyes flicked nervously to the documents on the table. It came from the top. Higher than you can imagine. You're not the first to come looking for answers. And you won't be the last. Mike's gaze shifted to Ethan, who was standing silently by the door. The young detective's face was a mixture of disbelief and growing anger. This was not the kind of case he had ever imagined working on. But Mike had known from the beginning that it wouldn't be a simple investigation. It was a Pandora's box, and they had opened it. Without another word, Mike moved toward the computer. He needed to gather every shred of evidence, every bit of information, and take it straight to the higher-ups. But the more he looked, the more he realized just how deep the conspiracy ran. It wasn't just about Riley. It was about a vast network that spanned far beyond the Detroit Police Department, a network that had been using innocent lives to fulfill a darker agenda. "We're done here," Mike said, standing up and turning toward the figures who had tried to bury the truth. "You'll be taken into custody, and you'll talk. All of you." As the two detectives left the facility, Riley's story was far from over. The information they had uncovered would shake the foundations of the police force, exposing the hidden operations that had been run under the radar for years. But it wasn't just about exposing the corruption. It was about ensuring that Riley, and every other animal or person who had been a part of this dark operation, received the justice they deserved. Back at the clinic, Dr. Sarah Jenkins had been waiting, her eyes filled with worry as she watched Riley's progress. But as Mike and Ethan walked in, there was a sense of relief in the air. Riley was safe for now, his body recovering, but it was his spirit that had remained unbroken throughout. He had been through unimaginable pain and hardship, yet he stood as a symbol of resilience, of the bond between humans and their loyal companions. In the end, it wasn't the twisted operation or the secrets they had uncovered that mattered most. It was Riley's story, the story of a dog who had served with honor, who had been discarded when he was no longer useful, and who had fought for his own survival. That was the real victory, because, in a world full of shadows, Riley was a reminder that no matter how dark things got, there was always the possibility of redemption, of light piercing through the darkness. The case was closed, but Riley's legacy would live on. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.